It has come to the attention of the Homeowners Association that the storage structure located on your property is in violation of several established covenants. Storage structure? I scoffed. They can't even bring themselves to say shed? Too rustic? The list of offenses followed, each one a tiny pinprick to my meticulously maintained sense of order. The structure is deemed unsightly and detracts from the overall aesthetic of the neighborhood. Unsightly? I reread the word, a slow burn of amusement rising in my chest. My shed? The epitome of functional elegance? Compared to what? Karen's collection of garden gnomes? The structure's placement is in close proximity to the property line, potentially encroaching upon neighboring properties. Potentially encroaching? I glanced at my shed, which stood a good 5 feet from the property line. Unless my shed has suddenly developed a mind of its own and is planning a midnight migration, I think we're safe. Furthermore, the structure's design does not conform to the architectural guidelines of the community. Architectural guidelines? I nearly choked on my own laughter. Since when did a shed need to be architecturally significant? Is there a shed style guide I missed? Victorian shed chic? Bauhaus tool barn? The letter concluded with the standard threat of escalating fines if the unsightly structure wasn't removed within 30 days. It was signed, of course, by Karen, the HOA president, a woman whose power complex was only surpassed by her questionable fashion choices. I pictured her now, perched on her throne of suburban tyranny, a smug smile plastered across her face. Probably wearing those hideous floral print pants she seems to favor. I leaned back against my perfectly alphabetized rake collection, a slow smile spreading across my face. They wanted a fight? Oh, they were going to get a war, and I was just the man to wage it. 30 days, huh? I murmured to myself, the amusement in my voice growing. Let's see what I can accomplish in 30 days. My gaze drifted to the shed, my sanctuary of organized bliss. An idea was forming in my mind, a deliciously petty, wonderfully elaborate plan. It involved power tools, a few strategically placed fairy lights, and a whole lot of spite. The HOA had declared war on my shed. They had no idea what they'd unleashed. Armed with my meticulously compiled evidence, photos showcasing the shed's impeccable condition, highlighted sections of the HOA rulebook that were as vague as a politician's promises, and a spreadsheet detailing the precise distance between my shed and the property line, 4.7 feet to be exact. I marched into the lion's den, also known as the HOA office. The office itself was a testament to beige walls, beige carpet, beige furniture. It was the kind of place where creativity went to die a slow, agonizing death by paperwork. Karen, of course, was a splash of color in this sea of blandness. Today's ensemble featured a tropical print blouse that clashed violently with her coral lipstick. I briefly wondered if she was colorblind or just enjoyed inflicting pain on the aesthetically inclined. "Karen," I said, my voice a model of forced cheerfulness. "Lovely blouse." She gave me a tight-lipped smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Thank you, Finn. What can I do for you?" "Well, I received this rather interesting notice about my shed." I placed the offending document on her desk, careful not to disturb the feng shui of her paperclip arrangement. Karen's smile tightened further. "Yes, the shed. It's a clear violation of several community covenants." "With all due respect, Karen, I've reviewed the covenants, and I fail to see how my shed is in violation." I launched into my carefully prepared presentation, complete with visual aids. As you can see from these photos, the shed is well maintained, structurally sound, and poses no threat to the neighborhood's aesthetic integrity. Karen's eyes glazed over as I spoke, her attention clearly focused on something far more interesting, like the lint on her meticulously manicured nails. "The fact remains, Finn," she interrupted, her voice dripping with condescension, "that the shed does not conform to the community's aesthetic standards. It's unsightly." "Unsightly?" I echoed, my voice laced with incredulity. Compared to what? Mr. Henderson's rusty old RV that's been parked on his lawn for 6 months? Or Mrs. Peterson's collection of pink flamingos that seem to multiply every week? Karen's eyes narrowed. Those are separate matters, Finn. We're discussing your shed. Right. My shed, I said, my frustration starting to simmer. Which, as I've demonstrated, is perfectly within the regulations. The HOA board has the final say in these matters, Finn, Karen said, her voice taking on a steely edge. And we've deemed your shed unacceptable. So, what you're saying is, I said slowly, that the rules are whatever you decide they are at any given moment? The rules are in place to maintain the harmony and value of our community, Karen said, her tone brooking no argument. Harmony? I scoffed. By arbitrarily fining residents for having sheds that don't meet your subjective standards of beauty? Karen's face flushed with anger. This is not a discussion, Finn. You have 30 days to remove the shed. If you fail to comply, you will be fined daily until you do so. Fine, I said, my voice deceptively calm. Have it your way. I gathered my documents, my mind already racing with possibilities. They wanted a fight? Oh, they were going to get a war, and I was just getting started. As I walked out of the HOA office, I couldn't help but smile. Karen and her cronies had no idea what they'd unleashed. They thought they could bully me into submission with their petty rules and their threats of fines. They thought they could control my shed. They were about to learn a very valuable lesson. Never underestimate a man with a perfectly organized shed and a healthy dose of spite. The next morning, I woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. The HOA had poked the bear, and now the bear was ready to play. Operation Shedification was a go. First, I needed reinforcements. A quick call to my best friend, Liam, a graphic designer with a flair for the dramatic and a healthy disdain for all things HOA, secured his services as chief aesthetic consultant. Then I approached Mr. Henderson, the retired contractor who lived across the street. He was a gruff but kind man who, like me, had been on the receiving end of Karen's reign of terror. Apparently, his prize-winning begonias were not in keeping with the neighborhood's floral theme. He agreed to lend his expertise and, more importantly, his collection of power tools to the cause. With my team assembled, we set to work. The shed, once a humble repository for gardening tools and forgotten Christmas decorations, was about to undergo a metamorphosis. We're not just fixing this shed, Finn, Liam declared, his eyes gleaming with mischief. We're weaponizing it. And weaponize it we did. Mr. Henderson, with the precision of a surgeon and the enthusiasm of a man who'd been waiting years for an excuse to use his industrial-grade sander, stripped the shed's exterior down to its bare bones. Then, under Liam's artistic direction, we clad it in new siding, painted a cheerful shade of sunshine yellow that was sure to give Karen an aneurysm. Think she'll like the trim? I asked, holding up a sample of bright turquoise. If by like you mean spontaneously combust, then yes, definitely, Liam said, grinning. Next came the windows. We replaced the single, dusty window with a set of French doors, salvaged from Mr. Henderson's recent bathroom renovation. Adds a touch of class, he grunted, clearly pleased with his contribution. Inside, the transformation was even more dramatic. We installed a compact coffee bar, complete with a gleaming espresso machine and a hand-painted sign that read, HOA Tiers, $5. Liam, ever the aesthete, insisted on adding a vintage chandelier, which he'd found at a flea market for a steal. It's all about the ambiance, darling, he declared, adjusting the crystals with a flourish. The finishing touch was the landscaping. We planted a riot of colorful flowers around the shed, a deliberate middle finger to the HOA's obsession with conformity. I even added a small water feature, a miniature fountain that gurgled cheerfully, its sound a constant reminder of my defiance. As we stood back to admire our handiwork, a sense of satisfaction washed over me. The shed, once a symbol of the HOA's petty tyranny, was now a beacon of rebellion, a testament to our collective ingenuity and spite. They're going to lose their minds, Liam said, his eyes sparkling with anticipation. "Oh, I know," I said, grinning, "and it's going to be glorious." The HOA had declared war on my shed. They had no idea they were about to get served a steaming cup of revenge with a side of poetic justice. The morning of the grand opening dawned bright and clear, as if even the universe was in on the joke. A hand-painted sign, courtesy of Liam's artistic talents, swung gently in the breeze. The Shed Café opened for business. Below it, in smaller letters, "Serving justice, one cup at a time." The cafe itself was a masterpiece of passive aggression, every detail meticulously planned to maximize Karen's impending aneurysm. Fairy lights twinkled invitingly, casting a warm glow on the brightly colored tables and chairs we'd set up in the yard. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the sweet scent of rebellion. My barista friend, Chloe, arrived early, her eyes sparkling with excitement. Chloe, like me, had a history with the HOA. Hers involved a dispute over the unauthorized placement of a wind chime that apparently violated the neighborhood's noise ordinance. I swear, these people would find something to complain about if a bird chirped too loudly. "Ready to serve some justice, Finn?" she asked, tying on her apron. "Absolutely," I replied, handing her a stack of menus. "Let's see how they like the taste of HOA tears." The menu was a work of art in itself. Along with the usual coffee offerings, we had a selection of pastries with names designed to provoke. Karen's Krabby Cakes, HOA Heartburn Brownies, and the Rule Breaker Raspberry Scone. "Think they'll get the message?" Chloe asked, a mischievous grin spreading across her face. "Oh, I think it'll be crystal clear," I said, winking. The first customers started arriving shortly after we opened. They were a mix of curious neighbors, fellow HOA dissidents, and a few who just genuinely loved coffee. Word had spread quickly about the rebellious Shed Café, and everyone was eager to see what it was all about. Mr. Henderson was our first customer. He ordered a Karen's Krabby Cake and a double espresso. "Best darn coffee I've had in years," he declared, taking a sip. "And that cake, well, let's just say it's got a certain bite to it." As the morning progressed, the cafe buzzed with activity. Laughter and conversation filled the air, a welcome change from the usual stifling quiet of the neighborhood. It was clear that the cafe had struck a chord with the community, a haven of normalcy in a place suffocated by rules. Even a few HOA members, disguised in sunglasses and baseball caps, couldn't resist the allure of the HOA Tears coffee. They'd sneak in, order quickly, and then slink away, pretending they hadn't been there. I watched them with amusement, knowing that Karen would be absolutely livid if she found out. "This is perfect," Chloe said, watching the happy customers. "It's exactly what this neighborhood needed." "Indeed," I said, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. A little bit of rebellion, a dash of caffeine, and a whole lot of spite. The grand opening of the Shed Café was a success. Not only had we created a thriving little business, but we'd also struck a blow against the HOA's tyranny. And the best part? We were just getting started. The war had begun, and I had a feeling it was going to be a long, delicious, and highly caffeinated one. The inevitable happened. It was only a matter of time before Karen and her HOA cronies caught wind of the Shed Café. I had, of course, anticipated their reaction. A symphony of sputtering indignation, a chorus of pearl-clutching pronouncements, and a crescendo of pure, unadulterated fury. And they didn't disappoint. The first salvo arrived in the form of a brightly colored, what else, cease and desist letter, delivered by a visibly uncomfortable-looking teenager who scurried away as if he expected the shed itself to bite him. The letter, penned in Karen's distinctive brand of passive-aggressive legalese, accused me of operating a commercial enterprise within a residential zone, a clear violation of the sacred covenants. I chuckled. Commercial enterprise. I reread the phrase, a slow smile spreading across my face. Oh, Karen, you have no idea. The next day, Karen herself descended upon the cafe, her face a mask of barely suppressed rage. She was accompanied by 2 HOA board members, both of whom looked as if they'd rather be anywhere else. "Finn," Karen began, her voice trembling with indignation. "What is the meaning of this establishment?" "Why, Karen," I said, my voice dripping with faux innocence, "this is the Shed Café. We serve coffee, pastries, and the occasional dose of poetic justice." Karen's eyes narrowed. "Don't play coy with me, Finn. You know this is a clear violation of the HOA covenants." "Do I?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. Because I seem to recall reviewing those covenants quite thoroughly, and I didn't see anything about prohibiting the sale of caffeinated beverages. Karen sputtered. But it's a business. You can't just operate a business out of your shed." "Actually, Karen," I said, reaching for a framed document that leaned casually against the coffee bar, "I can. Allow me to introduce you to my business license, duly registered with the city. See? The Shed Café, purveyors of fine coffee and baked goods." I tapped the document with my finger. "Quite official, wouldn't you say?" Karen's face flushed crimson. "This is outrageous. You're deliberately flouting the rules." "The rules?" I echoed, my voice laced with amusement. "Or your interpretation of the rules. Because I seem to recall a certain incident with some begonias." I trailed off, letting the unspoken accusation hang in the air. Mr. Henderson, who happened to be enjoying a leisurely cup of HOA tears at a nearby table, chuckled. Karen glared at him, then turned back to me, her voice rising in pitch. "You're going to regret this, Finn. The HOA will not tolerate this blatant disregard for our community standards." "Oh, I'm sure you won't," I said calmly. "But I'm also fairly confident that the city, which has already approved my business license, will have a different opinion." Karen and her cronies stormed off, their faces a mixture of fury and bewilderment. I watched them go, a slow smile spreading across my face. They had thrown down the gauntlet, and I was more than happy to pick it up. The battle had begun, and I had a feeling it was going to be a long, delicious, and highly caffeinated one. Chapter 6. The Community Rallies. The Shed Café, born from defiance, blossomed into a symbol of resistance. It became a haven for those who had long suffered in silence under the HOA's tyrannical rule. Neighbors who had previously only exchanged furtive glances over meticulously trimmed hedges now gathered around tables, sharing stories of HOA injustices over steaming cups of rebellious roast. Mrs. Peterson, the pink flamingo enthusiast, confessed that she'd been forced to repaint her front door a regulation shade of beige after Karen deemed her original choice of vibrant turquoise an affront to the senses. Mr. Henderson recounted the saga of his prize-winning begonias, exiled to the backyard after their nonconformist hues were deemed unacceptable. Even Mrs. Davis, the seemingly timid widow from down the street, revealed that she'd been threatened with a fine for hanging her laundry outside to dry. Apparently, clotheslines were considered visually disruptive. "It's about time someone stood up to them," Mr. Henderson declared, raising his mug in a toast. "To Finn, the shed slayer." The cafe became a hub for strategizing and organizing. Petitions circulated, demanding HOA reform and an end to the arbitrary rule enforcement. A neighborhood watch group was formed, not to report suspicious activity, but to document instances of HOA overreach. The once compliant residents of Willow Creek Estates were finally finding their voice. The Shed Café's fame spread beyond the confines of our little neighborhood. Local influencers, drawn by the story of the rebellious shed, flocked to the cafe, their phones snapping photos of the quirky menu and the defiant atmosphere. The hashtag #ShedStrong trended on social media, and soon, articles about the hidden backyard cafe appeared in local newspapers and blogs. The Shed Café became a viral sensation, a symbol of resistance against the tyranny of HOAs everywhere. Even some HOA members, their resolve weakened by the delicious aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the infectious laughter that spilled from the cafe, began to frequent the establishment in secret. I'd often spot them lurking in the back, their faces hidden behind oversized sunglasses, furtively sipping their rule-breaker lattes. I didn't say anything. I knew their patronage was a small act of rebellion, a silent acknowledgement that even they were tired of the HOA's suffocating rules. The café was more than just a business. It was a catalyst for change. It brought the community together, gave them a voice, and showed them the power of collective action. The HOA, once an unassailable force, was now crumbling under the weight of its own absurdity. One afternoon, as I watched the café buzzing with activity, a sense of pride washed over me. I had set out to defend my shed, and in the process, I had inadvertently sparked a revolution. The shed café, born from defiance, had become a symbol of hope, a testament to the power of community and the enduring human spirit. "You know," Chloe said, handing me a steaming cup of HOA's Demise espresso, a new addition to the menu, "you've actually created something special here, Finn." "I think we all did," I replied, raising my mug in a toast, "to the community, to the shed, and to the sweet taste of rebellion." The battle was far from over, but for the first time I felt a surge of optimism. The HOA had underestimated the power of the people, the power of a good cup of coffee, and the power of a shed with a story to tell. And I knew with a certainty that warmed me like a perfectly brewed latte that we were going to win. Chapter 7. Checkmate. The HOA, bruised but not broken, resorted to their final weapon: litigation. They filed a lawsuit, claiming that the Shed Café was a public nuisance, a blight on the community, and a violation of every HOA covenant ever conceived. They demanded its immediate closure and, of course, sought exorbitant damages for the emotional distress caused by my blatant disregard for their authority. I, in turn, enlisted the services of Miss Anya Sharma, a lawyer whose reputation for dismantling HOAs was legendary. She was a force of nature in the courtroom, a whirlwind of legal jargon and razor-sharp wit. I knew I was in good hands. The courtroom was packed. On one side sat Karen and her HOA entourage, their faces grim, their hopes pinned on this last-ditch effort to regain control. On the other side sat a motley crew of Shed Café supporters, Mr. Henderson, Mrs. Peterson, Chloe, and a host of other neighbors, their faces a mixture of anticipation and defiance. The HOA's lawyer, a pompous man with a penchant for dramatic pauses and condescending glances, laid out their case. He argued that the Shed Café was a commercial enterprise operating illegally in a residential zone, causing noise pollution, traffic congestion, and a general decline in the neighborhood's aesthetic harmony. Miss Sharma, in contrast, was a model of calm efficiency. She systematically dismantled the HOA's arguments, pointing out the inconsistencies in their covenants, the lack of evidence for their claims, and the blatant hypocrisy of their selective enforcement. Then, with a flourish that would make a magician proud, she revealed her trump card. "Your Honor," she said, her voice ringing with confidence, "I'd like to draw your attention to Section 4, Subsection 2, Paragraph 7 of the Willow Creek Estates Covenants." A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Karen's face paled. Miss Sharma continued. "This section clearly states that any structure erected on a resident's property that is used for the purpose of enhancing community spirit is exempt from the aforementioned restrictions." She paused for effect, her eyes twinkling. "And I believe, Your Honor, that the Shed Café, with its vibrant atmosphere, its support of local artists, and its role as a community gathering place, embodies the very definition of enhancing community spirit." The courtroom erupted in cheers. Mr. Henderson let out a whoop of joy. Mrs. Peterson's pink flamingo earrings swayed excitedly. Even the court reporter cracked a smile. The judge, clearly amused by the proceedings, rapped his gavel for order. "Order? Order in the court." He looked at the HOA's lawyer, his expression unreadable. "Mr. Johnson, do you have any further arguments?" Mr. Johnson, his face the color of parchment, stammered, Your Honor, I think it's safe to say, Mr. Johnson, the judge interrupted, a hint of amusement in his voice, that the defense has presented a rather compelling argument. He turned to Miss Sharma. Miss Sharma, I commend you on your creative interpretation of the covenants. Miss Sharma smiled. Thank you, Your Honor. I merely believe in upholding the spirit of the law, even if it means occasionally bending the letter. The judge nodded. Very well. Case dismissed. He banged his gavel, the sound echoing through the courtroom. The Shed Café may remain open for business. The cheers erupted again, louder this time. I caught Karen's eye, her face a mask of disbelief and fury. I couldn't help but grin. Checkmate. As we left the courtroom, victorious and vindicated, I turned to Miss Sharma. That was brilliant, I said, shaking her hand. I never even noticed that clause. Miss Sharma chuckled. It's amazing what you can find when you're looking for it, she said, her eyes twinkling. Besides, it's not every day I get to argue in favor of a coffee shop. The HOA's final, desperate attempt to shut down the Shed Café had backfired spectacularly. They had underestimated the power of community, the ingenuity of a determined individual, and the legal prowess of a lawyer with a sense of humor. The Shed Café was here to stay, a symbol of defiance, a haven for coffee lovers, and a constant reminder that even the most formidable of HOAs could be defeated with a little bit of creativity and a whole lot of caffeine. The Shed Café, once a symbol of defiance, evolved into a beloved local landmark. It was a testament to the ingenuity of one man, the power of community, and the enduring appeal of a good cup of coffee. The HOA, defeated in court and discredited in the eyes of the community, withered away. Karen, stripped of her authority and the source of her power trips, resigned in disgrace. The remaining board members, realizing the futility of their reign, followed suit. The reign of terror was over. Willow Creek Estates was free. Freed from the shackles of HOA tyranny, the neighborhood blossomed. Gardens bloomed with a riot of unauthorized colors. Children's laughter echoed through the streets, no longer stifled by noise restrictions. And at the heart of it all was the Shed Café, a hub of activity and a source of community pride. I expanded the café, adding a small stage for live music, a patio for outdoor events, and a weekly farmers market featuring local vendors. The Shed Café became the place to be, not just in Willow Creek Estates, but in the entire city. People came from miles around to experience the unique atmosphere, the delicious coffee, and the sense of community that permeated the air. One sunny afternoon, several months after the HOA's demise, I sat at my usual table sipping a cup of my signature HOA's Demise Espresso, a blend of dark roast with a hint of bittersweet victory. Chloe, now the cafe's manager and my partner in crime, joined me, a mischievous glint in her eyes. You know, she said, leaning back in her chair, we really showed them, didn't we? We did, I replied, a smile spreading across my face. Never underestimate the power of a good cup of coffee and a healthy dose of spite. We reminisced about the past year, the battles fought, the victories won, and the community that had rallied around the Shed Café. We laughed about Karen's increasingly outrageous attempts to shut us down, the absurdity of the HOA's rules, and the sheer joy of watching their authority crumble. It's amazing how much has changed, Chloe said, her voice filled with wonder. This neighborhood used to be so sterile. Now it's actually fun. Indeed, I said, raising my mug in a toast. To the Shed Café, the little rebellion that could. As I took a sip of my espresso, the bittersweet flavor a perfect metaphor for the journey we'd been on, I couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. I had set out to defend my shed, and in the process, I had helped create something truly special. The Shed Café was more than just a business. It was a symbol of hope, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, and a reminder that even the most formidable of foes could be defeated with a little bit of creativity, a lot of community support, and a really, really good cup of coffee. And as I looked around at the happy faces, the laughter, and the sense of belonging that filled the Shed Café, I knew that this was just the beginning. The legacy of the Shed would live on, a beacon of defiance, a haven for coffee lovers, and a constant reminder that sometimes the best revenge is a life well lived, one delicious cup of coffee at a time. "Your porch," Stan finally said, his voice flat. "Yeah," I confirmed. "4 steps? Give or take. And you want an escalator. Preferably automatic, with safety features." Another pause. Then a low chuckle. "Okay, buddy, okay. You win the weirdest request of the decade award. Why in the Sam Hill do you want an escalator on your porch?" "Long story," I said. "Involves riser height violations and spite. It wasn't like I had some crumbling, dangerous staircase. My house, a perfectly respectable 2-story colonial in this meticulously planned slice of suburban Ohio, had 4 concrete steps leading up to the front porch. Standard issue. Probably poured back when the house was built in the late 90s. Were they beautiful? No. Were they functional? Absolutely. Did they safely convey me, my wife Judy, our 2 kids, when they visited from college, groceries, Amazon packages, and the occasional overly enthusiastic Girl Scout cookie salesperson from the walkway to the porch? Every single time. So imagine my surprise when I received the letter. You know the one. Thick cream envelope, fancy HOA letterhead, probably printed using ink distilled from the tears of non-compliant homeowners. It wasn't hand-delivered by Mr. Harrison this time, just arrived via certified mail, which somehow made it even more ominous. "Dear Mr. Robert Jenkins." Always Robert when it's bad news. I go by Bob. "This letter serves as official notification of a violation of the Willow Creek Preserve Covenants, Conditions and Restrictions, CC and Rs, observed at your property, 14 Willow Creek Way." My heart sank. What now? Was my lawn half an inch too high? Was my recycling bin visible from the street for 11 minutes past the approved time? I read on, my brow furrowing. "Pursuant to an inspection by the Architectural Review Committee, ARC, on October 12th. Inspection? Harrison must have been lurking with his tape measure again. "It has been determined that the front porch steps are non-compliant with ARC Guideline #14B, subsection 3, regarding staircase riser height uniformity and specification." Riser height? You gotta be kidding me. "Specifically," the letter continued, clearly relishing the detail, "while the bottom 3 risers measure within the acceptable tolerance of 7 inches, 7 +/1/8 inch, 1/8. The top riser connecting to the porch surface measures 7 1/4 inches, 7 1/4 1/4. This variance of 1/4 inch, 1/4, exceeds the allowable tolerance and constitutes a structural non-compliance and potential tripping hazard." It also noted, almost as an afterthought, that my current step paint color, battleship gray, was not an approved shade and should be dove gray or pebble path. 1/4 of an inch, on one step, a step that had been there for 25 years without causing a single documented trip, fall, or existential crisis. And the paint color? Give me a break! I stormed inside, waving the letter. "Judy, you are not going to believe this." Judy, ever the pragmatist, read the letter calmly. 1/4 inch? Seriously? And they don't like the gray? She sighed. "Okay, well, can't you just, I don't know, grind it down a bit? Or maybe add a thin layer to the other steps to even it out. And we can repaint." "That's what I thought," I said. "Simple fix, right?" "Wrong." I fired off a polite email to the ARC via the HOA management portal, outlining my proposed simple fixes: grinding the top step slightly, or applying a thin concrete overlay to the bottom 3, and repainting in the glorious dove gray. The response, when it came a week later, was swift and brutal. Dear Mr. Jenkins, the ARC has reviewed your proposed remediation. Unfortunately, surface grinding or overlays are not approved methods for correcting structural noncompliance. Guideline 14B requires uniform riser height achieved through proper initial construction. Furthermore, any alteration requires submission of detailed plans for ARC approval. The only acceptable remedy is the complete removal and reconstruction of the non-compliant staircase to meet the exact specifications outlined in the CC and Rs, utilizing pre-approved materials and colors. Please submit architectural plans for the replacement staircase within 60 days. Accompanying this was a helpful list of ARC-approved concrete contractors. I stared at the email in disbelief. Complete reconstruction? For 1/4 of an inch? And I had to submit architectural plans for 4 concrete steps? This wasn't about safety. This wasn't about aesthetics. This was about power. This was about Mr. Harrison, the retired civil engineer who chaired the ARC, getting his jollies by enforcing rules with microscopic precision. He probably measured the blades of grass on his lawn with calipers. I requested a face-to-face meeting. Big mistake. It was held in the clubhouse again, Harrison presiding, flanked by his 2 usual nodding accomplices. I pleaded my case, argued about proportionality, cost, common sense, pointed out that replacing the whole thing would cost thousands for an imperceptible difference. Harrison adjusted his perfectly knotted tie. "Robert," he said, his voice smooth but unyielding, "the bylaws are the bedrock upon which this community's value and visual harmony are built. Precision matters. Uniformity matters. Standards must be maintained. If we grant a variance for 1/4 inch here, where does it end? 1/2 an inch? Inconsistent tread depths? Non-orthogonal railings?" He shuddered. "It's a slippery slope to chaos, Robert. Complete reconstruction is the only compliant path forward. Submit your plans." I walked out of there feeling utterly defeated, but also incandescently angry. The sheer, unadulterated pettiness, the bureaucratic insanity. Rebuild perfectly functional steps over a 1/4 inch discrepancy. Spend thousands of dollars and weeks of hassle because Harrison had a vendetta against minor deviations? I got home and just stared at my front porch. 4 simple concrete steps. My adversaries. I thought about the work involved. Demolition, forming, pouring concrete, finishing, painting dove gray. The disruption, the cost, all for a 1/4 inch. There had to be a better way, an easier way. A way to get from the walkway to the porch without worrying about fractions of an inch. A way that was smooth, effortless, automated. The idea didn't fully crystallize until a few days later. I was at the mall with Judy, enduring the weekend crowds, feeling generally miserable about the impending porch step demolition project. We were heading up to the 2nd level, and I stepped onto the escalator. That smooth, gliding ascent, the low hum of the machinery, the moving handrail under my palm. Effortless, consistent. No steps to measure, no risers to quibble over. Just upward mobility. And then it hit me, like a bolt of pure, unadulterated, possibly certifiable genius. An escalator. From my front porch. I stopped dead halfway up, causing a minor pile-up behind me. "Bob, what is it?" Judy asked, grabbing my arm. "The steps," I whispered, eyes wide with dawning realization. "The HOA, Harrison." "What about them?" "They want perfectly regulated ascent, right?" I grinned, a slow, mad grin spreading across my face. Uniformity? Precision? No tripping hazards? Judy looked wary. Yeah, I'll give them perfectly regulated ascent, I declared, maybe a little too loudly. Automated, consistent, code compliant. Probably. Bob, Judy said slowly, pulling me off the top of the now stationary human conveyor belt behind us. What are you talking about? I announced, gesturing back at the escalator, am going to install one of these on our front porch. Judy just stared at me, blinked, then sighed the deep, weary sigh of a woman married to a man prone to occasional bouts of extreme absurdity. Okay, honey, let's get you some coffee, and maybe check the side effects on your allergy medication. But the idea had taken root. It was insane, yes. Wildly impractical, absolutely. Eye-wateringly expensive? Almost certainly. But the thought of Mr. Harrison's face when he saw a commercial escalator gliding smoothly up to my front door? Priceless. The ultimate FU to his quarter-inch tyranny. That night, I hit the internet with the fervor of a conspiracy theorist uncovering hidden truths. Residential escalator. Results: mostly just mobility stair lifts for disabled access, not actual moving staircases. Okay, scratch that. Commercial escalator short rise. Results: lots of companies, Otis, Schindler, Cone, specializing in massive installations for airports, malls, stadiums. But did they make small ones? Like really small? 4 steps is maybe a 4 or 5 foot vertical rise. I dug deeper. Found technical specs. ASME A17. 1. The safety code for elevators and escalators. Dense. Complicated. Clearly written for commercial buildings, not suburban houses. Power requirements? Huge. Often 3-phase power, which my house definitely didn't have. Structural requirements? Escalators weigh tons. They need a reinforced pit at the bottom, heavy-duty support at the top. My wooden porch structure would need a complete rebuild. Weatherproofing? Commercial escalators are usually indoors. An outdoor one would need specialized components, drainage, heating elements to prevent icing. The complexity grew exponentially. And the cost? Preliminary searches suggested even a short, basic used commercial escalator section could run into the tens, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars, before installation and modification. Any sane person would have abandoned the idea right there, filed for the permit to rebuild the concrete steps in glorious dove gray. But the image of Harrison's face, the sheer, magnificent absurdity of it, I couldn't let it go. Judy, I said tentatively over dinner, hypothetically, if we skipped vacation for, say, the next 10 years, and maybe took out a second mortgage. It's the escalator thing again, isn't it? She sighed. Bob, be serious. I am serious. Think of the convenience. No more carrying heavy groceries up the steps. Increased property value. Who else has a porch escalator? Okay, maybe not that last one. And besides, I lowered my voice conspiratorially. I checked the HOA bylaws again. Pages about stairs, railings, paint colors, not one single word about mechanical conveyances or escalators. It's not explicitly forbidden. Judy just shook her head. That doesn't mean they'll approve it, Bob. They'll find a reason. And the cost. But imagine Harrison's reaction, I pleaded. Just imagine. She paused. A tiny smile played on her lips. Okay, she said finally. Okay, fine, get a quote, a real quote. If it costs less than a new car, we can talk about it. But if it involves selling a kidney, the answer is no. Challenge accepted. Finding someone willing to quote installing an escalator on a 4-step porch was my next hurdle. The big companies politely declined. We don't handle residential projects of that nature, sir. Smaller elevator repair places thought I was joking. Finally, I found Elevated Solutions, Inc. online. They seemed to specialize in custom lift solutions and modernizing older commercial units. I called, got put through to a senior technician named Stan. Stan, the escalator man. He sounded like he'd been doing this forever, voice calm and slightly weary. I explained my situation, trying to sound as rational as possible while describing my plan to install a commercial escalator for a 5-foot rise on my front porch, because the HOA didn't like my steps. There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear faint background noise machinery humming, maybe. "Your porch," Stan finally said, his voice flat. "Yeah," I confirmed. "4 steps? Give or take." "And you want an escalator?" "Preferably automatic, with safety features." Another pause. Then a low chuckle. "Okay, buddy, okay. You win the weirdest request of the decade award. Why in the Sam Hill do you want an escalator on your porch?" "Long story," I said. "Involves riser height violations and spite." Stan laughed outright this time. "Spite? Best reason I've heard all year. All right, Mr. Spiteful, technically. Yeah, it's possible. We could potentially source a short, refurbished unit, maybe from a store that remodeled, or custom build a short section, but that's megabucks. But listen," his voice turned serious. "The installation is the nightmare. You need major structural work on that porch, serious reinforcement. You need a concrete pit dug at the bottom, perfectly level with drainage. You need heavy-duty electrical service run out there. Might even need a phase converter depending on the motor. Weatherproofing is a beast. Rain, snow, ice, leaves. These things aren't really designed for direct outdoor exposure 24/7. And safety codes? We'd have to follow ASME A17. One commercial code to the letter, even on your porch. That means all the sensors, emergency stops, skirt guards, comb plates, the works. It's gonna cost," he paused for effect, "an absolutely obscene amount of money." "More than a new car?" I asked, thinking of Judy's threshold. "Oh yeah," Stan chuckled grimly. "Try more than a luxury car. Maybe 2. My heart sank. But the image of Harrison's face. Can you work up a preliminary estimate, Stan?" I asked weakly. "Ballpark?" "Yeah, I can ballpark it," Stan sighed. "But don't say I didn't warn you when you need smelling salts. And permits? Buddy, getting the city to approve this? Good luck, you're gonna need it." The ballpark estimate arrived via email a few days later. I opened it. My eyes watered. It wasn't just luxury car territory, it was a small yacht territory. I showed it to Judy. She looked at it, looked at me, looked back at the estimate, and just started laughing. Not a happy laugh. More of a, "we are definitely going to be eating ramen for the next decade" kind of laugh. "You're insane," she said finally, shaking her head. "Completely, utterly insane." "But," I prompted hopefully. She sighed again. "But Harrison did measure that step 3 times. And his smug little face?" She looked at the estimate again. "Fine. Get the permits first. If, and only if, the city actually approves this lunacy, we'll talk about selling the car. Game on. Getting those permits was going to be my Mount Everest. Navigating the city permit office with plans for a residential porch escalator was like trying to explain quantum physics to a goldfish. Blank stares, head scratching, flipping through code books with increasing desperation. "Okay, Mr. Jenkins," said Mr. Henderson. No relation to the other Hendersons, honestly. Is it the most common name in suburbia? The perpetually bewildered head of the planning department, after our 3rd meeting. "We've reviewed your application for an exterior mechanical staircase installation." That's the term my lawyer buddy suggested we use. "Frankly, our zoning code has no classification for this. It's not a staircase in the traditional sense. It's not an elevator. It's not a ramp. It's an escalator. On a porch. A permitted structure, hopefully," I prompted. That's the issue, he sighed, rubbing his temples. Which permit applies? Building code requires adherence to ASME A17, one for escalator safety, but that code is written assuming indoor commercial environments. How do we apply that outdoors? What about weatherproofing certifications? ADA accessibility, even though it's private? Electrical code for the high voltage service? He threw up his hands. Honestly, nobody here knows. Finally, possibly just to get me out of his office, Mr. Henderson from planning issued a heavily conditional permit. It was classified as a custom mechanical conveyance, subject to rigorous inspections at every stage, adherence to all applicable commercial safety codes, ASME A17-1, final approval by electrical and structural and fire safety inspectors, and a giant disclaimer saying the city assumed zero liability for anything related to this highly unusual installation. Good enough for me. The demolition began immediately, before the HOA could even react to the permit approval, which I hadn't notified them of yet. Gus the builder, yes, that Gus, he apparently specializes in weird HOA spite projects now, arrived with his crew and jackhammers. My 4 offending concrete steps were reduced to rubble in about an hour. Then came the serious work, excavating a deep, precise pit at the base of the porch, reinforcing the porch foundations with steel beams, rebuilding the landing area to accommodate the escalator's top mechanism. It was loud. It was messy. It took weeks. The neighborhood was, understandably, losing its collective mind. "Bob, what on earth are you doing?" yelled Mrs. Gable from across the street, hands on her hips. "Are you building a bunker entrance?" "Just some accessibility upgrades, Gladys," I shouted back over the sound of a concrete saw. Preparing for the future. Mr. Harrison, my nemesis, was practically living on his lawn, phone permanently attached to his ear, likely dictating frantic updates to the HOA board. Official letters started arriving daily. Notice: unauthorized demolition of approved porch structure. Demand: cease all unapproved construction immediately. Warning: significant structural alterations require ARC approval. I ignored them, taping my city permit to the front window. Then came Escalator Day. I'd managed to source a short, relatively new, only 5 years old, escalator section being removed from a department store undergoing renovation. Stan and his Elevated Solutions crew had refurbished it, added extra weatherproofing, and now it arrived on the biggest flatbed truck I'd ever seen. Getting it off the truck and into position required a massive crane that took up half the street. This stopped traffic, literally. Neighbors poured out of their houses, phones aloft, capturing the spectacle. The crane operator, with agonizing slowness, lifted the multi-ton escalator section gleaming metal steps, black rubber handrails, over my prize roses, and lowered it perfectly into the prepared pit and onto the reinforced porch landing. It slotted into place with a satisfying thunk. The crowd actually applauded. Mr. Harrison looked like he was going to weep. Stan's crew spent the next few days meticulously connecting everything, bolting the unit down, wiring the massive motor and control panel to the new, heavy-duty electrical service Sparky Steve had installed, requiring an upgrade to my main panel. Connecting the handrails, installing all the safety sensors, skirt guards, comb plates, emergency stop buttons at the top and bottom, photo eyes, pressure sensors. Gary the gas guy. No, wait, wrong story. I mean, Stan was obsessed with safety, which was reassuring. Finally, the moment arrived. Power on, system checks complete. Stan stood at the bottom, remote diagnostic tool in hand. "Okay, Bob," he said, giving me a thumbs up. "She's ready for her maiden voyage. All yours." My heart hammered. This was it. The culmination of months of planning, expense, and pure, unadulterated spite. I walked to the base of the escalator. The metal steps gleamed expectantly. I stepped on. With a low, almost silent hum, The steps began to move. Smoothly, effortlessly. The black rubber handrail glided perfectly under my palm. I ascended the 4-foot vertical rise in about 5 seconds, arriving precisely level with my porch floor. I stepped off. Silence. I turned around. Judy stood in the doorway, hand over her mouth, eyes wide. Kevin Jr., if I had one in this story, let's pretend I do, was jumping up and down. Stan grinned. And across the way, Mr. Harrison stood frozen on his porch, his face a perfect mask of horrified disbelief. I pressed the down button conveniently located on the porch railing, stepped on, glided smoothly back down, stepped off. It worked. It actually, gloriously, ridiculously worked. I had a functioning escalator on my front porch. The HOA's reaction to the operational escalator was swift and predictable. It was like I'd installed a nuclear reactor on my lawn. The daily fines quadrupled. The violation notices became practically unhinged. Immediate cease and desist. Operation of unauthorized industrial mechanical conveyance. Violation. Gross installation of commercial machinery in residential zone. Violation. Creation of extreme aesthetic nuisance and architectural aberration. Safety hazard warning. Uncertified, non-compliant vertical transportation device. Despite Stan's meticulous adherence to ASME A17, 1. Demand for immediate removal and restoration of previously approved staircase configuration. Their lawyer sent a blistering letter threatening immediate legal action, seeking a court order for removal, plus damages for irreparable harm to community character and diminished property values for the entire neighborhood. Apparently, my escalator was single-handedly capable of tanking the local real estate market. Then came the parade of city inspectors, undoubtedly summoned by a deluge of HOA and Harrison complaints. This wasn't just a quick check anymore. This was a multi-departmental investigation into the legality and safety of my porch avatar. First, the building inspector returned, armed with the massive ASME A17, one codebook. He spent hours with Stan, whom I had kept on retainer for this very eventuality, going over every safety feature. The emergency stop buttons, the skirt guards designed to prevent foot entrapment, the comb plates at the top and bottom, the braking system, the handrail speed synchronization. Stan patiently demonstrated every feature, provided manufacturer certifications for the refurbished unit, and showed the structural engineer's report for the porch modifications. The inspector looked overwhelmed. Okay. It seems to meet the technical safety specs for a commercial installation, he admitted grudgingly. But applying this code to an outdoor residential porch, it's unprecedented. I need to consult with the chief inspector and legal. He slapped a temporary pending final safety certification sticker on the unit, meaning I technically shouldn't operate it, but didn't order it shut down, yet. Next came the electrical inspector. He spent a day examining Sparky Steve's work, the upgraded panel, the heavy-duty conduit, the phase converter, yes, it needed one, the weatherproofing on the connections. Thankfully, Sparky was meticulous. The electrical passed, much to my relief, and probably Harrison's chagrin. Then, zoning came back. This was the big one. Was an escalator a permitted accessory use in a residential zone? Their code, like the HOA's, had nothing specific. They debated. Was it a structure subject to setback rules? It was close to the front line? Was it mechanical equipment subject to noise ordinances? It was actually very quiet. Was it fundamentally altering the residential character? After weeks of internal debate, they issued a bizarre ruling. It wasn't explicitly prohibited, but it also wasn't explicitly permitted. They wouldn't force removal based on zoning at this time, but reserved the right to revisit the issue if it became a demonstrable nuisance, or if safety certifications weren't finalized. A bureaucratic punt. The police showed up once, called by Harrison claiming neighborhood children were treating the escalator like an amusement park ride, creating a safety hazard. The officer arrived, saw me calmly riding the escalator up with a bag of groceries, saw no children anywhere near it. I'd become hyper-vigilant about that. Sighed, reminded me I was responsible for safety on my property, and told Harrison to stop calling unless there was an actual emergency. So I was in limbo. The escalator was installed. It worked beautifully. It hadn't been officially condemned by the city, but it wasn't fully signed off on either. And the HOA was still threatening fire and brimstone, and lawsuits. Time for the final showdown. The Emergency HOA Board Meeting, Part 2, Escalator Boogaloo. The atmosphere in the clubhouse meeting room was electric, and not just from the faulty fluorescent lights. This wasn't just about riser heights anymore. This was about the soul of Oak Knoll Meadows, apparently. The HOA had their lawyer, Mr. Loophole, ready for battle. I had my lawyer, Dave Miller, armed with permits, codes, and a healthy dose of sarcasm. The room was packed with curious and/or furious residents. Mr. Loophole went first, painting a picture of suburban apocalypse brought on by my escalator. He called it a dangerous, noisy, unsightly piece of industrial blight, citing violation after violation of vague aesthetic clauses. He claimed it would attract undesirable elements, people curious about the escalator house, lower property values catastrophically, and fundamentally destroy the peaceful, residential character of the neighborhood. He presented affidavits from Harrison and 2 other neighbors complaining about the constant mechanical humming, it was barely audible, and the stress of living near such an aberration. He demanded the board authorize immediate legal action to compel removal at my expense. Then Dave Miller stepped up. Calmly, methodically, he dismantled their arguments. First, he began, let's address the permits. Mr. Jenkins obtained all necessary city permits for the structural modifications, the electrical work, and the installation of what the city classified as a custom mechanical conveyance. The city, despite pressure, has not revoked these permits or deemed the installation inherently illegal under their codes. He continued, second, safety. The unit meets or exceeds all requirements of the applicable Commercial Safety Code, ASME A17.1, as certified by the installer and pending final city inspection, which is delayed only by the unprecedented nature, not by any found defect. It is likely safer than the original concrete steps. Third, aesthetics and bylaws. The HOA's bylaws meticulously regulate stairs, fences, sheds, even paint colors. They contain no mention or prohibition of escalators or mechanical conveyances. While the RC has broad aesthetic authority, that authority is not absolute, especially when applied retroactively to a costly, city-permitted installation that doesn't violate a specific written rule. Forcing removal based purely on subjective aesthetic harmony after permits were issued could be deemed arbitrary and capricious by a court. He finished by subtly mentioning RLUEPA might not apply, but other homeowner rights regarding property use certainly did. And litigation would be lengthy, expensive, and the outcome uncertain for the HOA. Then I spoke, briefly. Look, I said, trying to sound reasonable. I admit it's unusual, but the original issue was a 1/4 inch on one step. The Archie demanded a full, costly reconstruction. I explored alternatives. This alternative, while unconventional meets safety codes, is permitted by the city, and frankly, is incredibly convenient. I might have added a bit about potential accessibility benefits for future visitors, laying it on a little thick. The board members looked deeply uncomfortable. They were caught between Harrison's fury, their lawyer's bluster, the residents' mixed reactions, and Dave Miller's calm, legally sound arguments, and the implied threat of massive legal fees. They retreated into a closed session for deliberation. We waited, and waited. Finally, they emerged. President Abernathy looking grim. The verdict? A messy compromise. No forced removal, for now. They wouldn't pursue immediate legal action for demolition, acknowledging the permit situation was ambiguous. Operation halted, pending final city approval. I had to cease operating the escalator immediately, until and unless I obtained final, unequivocal safety certification and sign-off from all relevant city departments, building, electrical, zoning, specifically for outdoor residential use, a hurdle they knew might be impossible to clear. Aesthetic fines. Continue. They would continue levying daily fines for the aesthetic violations until the escalator was either fully certified and somehow deemed aesthetically acceptable by the ARC, unlikely, or removed. Mandatory enclosure screening. If I ever got it certified and operational again, I would be required to submit plans to the ARC for a visually harmonious enclosure or screening structure to hide the escalator mechanism from view, essentially building a box around it. It wasn't quite a loss, but it definitely wasn't a win. They couldn't force me to tear it down easily, but they could make it impossible to use and bleed me dry with fines in the meantime. So, what happened? Well, getting that final, unequivocal city sign-off for residential outdoor use proved as difficult as Stan the escalator man had predicted. The inspectors remained hesitant, citing the lack of specific codes and the potential liability. Without that final certification, I couldn't legally operate it. The escalator sat there, silent, for months, a magnificent, motionless monument to my spite. The HOA fines piled up. My lawyer sent letters. Their lawyer sent letters. It was exhausting. Eventually, I cried, "Uncle." Not completely, but strategically. I agreed to permanently disable the motor and remove the moving steps and handrails, leaving just the empty metal truss structure in place within the modified porch. I submitted plans to the ARC to enclose that structure with lattice and climbing vines, turning it into a weirdly angled, very deep planter box, trellis leading up to the porch. Surprisingly, they approved it. Probably just relieved the escalator itself was gone. The fines stopped. So now? Now I have the world's most over-engineered, structurally reinforced planter box where my porch steps used to be. Inside the lattice, you can still see the silent, empty metal framework of the escalator truss. It cost me a fortune. It caused months of aggravation. It became a local legend. Remember Bob Jenkins's porch escalator? Was it worth it? Every time I walk past Harrison's house and see him meticulously measuring his perfectly compliant 7-inch riser steps, I think so. He never got the satisfaction of seeing me rebuild my steps to his exact specifications. Instead, he gets to look at my giant, vine-covered escalator planter box, a bizarre trophy from the stupidest battle I ever fought. You gotta pick your hills to die on, I guess. Mine just happened to require 3-phase power and an emergency stop button. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to water my extremely well-supported climbing vines.